трошки зараз прокачаємось у англійській, тому що Укрурбан форум зібрав не тільки українських експертів та експерток, а й залучив іноземних фахівців для того, щоб обговорити урбаністику, міський простір і, звичайно ж таки, людські масштаби в цьому міському просторі. І зараз уже переді мною Джулі Лоусон, це ад'юнкт-професорка Центру урбаністики при Королівському Мельбурнському інституті технологій. І як вона сама сказала, що завдяки оцій представці ад'юнкт вона поєднує у собі не тільки теоретичні, а ще й практичні знання, і це створює суперкомбінацію. Зараз я переходжу на англійську. Я сподіваюся, що ви зрозумієте максимально багато, адже будемо старатися говорити максимально простою мовою. Якби ні, то потім вже в запису з'являться субтитри. І я сподіваюся, що ви повернетесь і подивитесь. So, Julie, hi.
Hi.
I translate all of this information that we talked about before our live translation, so our audience know something about you, and I described about this count adjunct professor. What does it mean? So our audience know who you are. So I'll start with a question about Lutsk, about your first impressions about the city. What do you think? And maybe did something surprise you here? And maybe something surprised compared to other European cities that you saw?
Well, what can one say when you arrive at 5 o'clock in the morning and it's dark and, you know, but you learn a little bit before you come, and you know that there's at least almost 250,000 people living in this town. That's really quite substantial.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about a small town. We're talking about a place of significance, of importance. And if we look at its population, we also see that it's, unlike other cities, it's actually been growing until recently. So it has a number of great attributes. It's also relatively safe, thank goodness. But you know, there are also real challenges for people here, and also for young people. So you know, having those qualities of being safe and also closer to the western side means that it's under pressure to some degree, and also it can be quite expensive. So for people living here, their housing costs have gone up by 10 to 15% in the last few years. So even though we've seen the plateauing of the population growth, their housing costs have actually grown during wartime. So we have to think about ways we can do something about that. So yeah, that's my very, very limited, you know, view from the bus. And I'm very pleased to be here. In the morning when I woke up and I walked across the across the square, it was actually really beautiful. And I was, there was public space that was cared for. There was flowers blooming. There was beautiful sculptures in the square. I walked down the promenade, and it was a really nice space to walk. People were having their breakfast in cafes. There was chatter, people walking down a pedestrianised street. There were large trees that were shading my walk as I walked to where we are today, where the conference is. Yeah, so it's a superficial impression, but you know, eyes wide open. Yeah.
I think that tomorrow you can see more because tomorrow they're really planning some excursions with guides, with local guides. I also like to have a long walk in a new cities. But when you arrive in a new country or in a new cities, maybe you have your method how to read the city and like such as urban textbook, maybe it's for you.
Well, I mean, I think you're so right. I mean, you have to be really observant, but also look at what's underneath all of this. You know, what's going on in terms of the city planning, the role of the municipality, what roles does it have in land policy, what influence can it have on the quality of the housing that people have here. What influence can it have on whether those homes are actually of a good standard? Are they warm and comfortable? Are they energy efficient? So there are things that are below the surface that we can't always see. And so at the conference here, you see lots of urban planners, architects, but also city people who work for city governments, often small teams, totally overstretched, which have a pretty huge job to keep, the quality of housing improving, and also that it's affordable for people to be able to access that housing, not just families with two incomes and all the rest, but young people wanting to leave home. So to have choices in your system that you can leave mum and dad's, get out of that tiny bedroom that you grew up in, have an independent life. So you see in different countries, people are able to leave home at different, in some countries it's very late, and in other countries there's freedom to move if you want to, much earlier. And it's all also about having good choices in that system, that, and also that those are quality choices, that we're not talking about really poor quality dormitories that are damp and cold and don't have sunlight where you can study with natural light in your room. Also about good rental accommodation where you're not worried about the rent going up next week or being evicted or having a bad contract, that can leave into trouble. So quality choices. And of course, not everybody, especially in a young stage of their lives, want to get burdened by a mortgage, that can literally be slavery. Where you might want to travel, you might want to educate yourself, or, try out living with that nice boyfriend or whatever. But, nobody needs a mortgage from the get-go. They need to grow and explore life and have freedom, and having housing that you can do that from is really a big part of that freedom, So, I think there are real things that can be done to improve the quality of choices in housing, so that people aren't just looking down the barrel of a mortgage, really, which, it is pretty tricky, in uncertain times.
Your mind about rent, and I read your words about rent in one of your interview to Ukrainian media. I think it was last year.
Okay.
You said that there are two different ways to rent, by market, by cost, by quality, and I like their example of Netherlands.
Okay.
Maybe you can provide to our audience more details about this approach.
Yeah. So in the Netherlands, you can have, in any country, you can decide how the market works in a way.
We have some challenges with this in Ukraine.
So you can decide on the law of the jungle and leave it to, the dominant figures. But it's rather an unhappy outcome, as we know. Or you can try and put some guardrails and some fairness into the system. And you see in countries like Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, reasonable rents relate to the quality of the dwelling that you're renting, how big it is, how, does it have a good kitchen? Is there a balcony? Is there a proper heating? Is it close to things? So the market can set that price, but you can also have some sort of guardrails, because if there's very few of those houses and a lot of people who need them, the price will be really high. And that's what's happened, of course, in Ukraine. So as there's been this massive shift from the east to the west, there's been a lot of pressure on the very small rental market in Ukraine. And even though Ukraine has this wonderful civil code, which actually has provisions in it which are really good, as soon as you make a contract the civil code is out the door. It's the contract which is what matters. And that contract can be just created from anything. There's no guidelines on what that should be. There should be a standard contract which protects your rights and also the rights of the landlord. So we need more standardization in that. But also in terms of rent setting, clearly in position where in wartime, as was the experience in Europe in COVID times, we took special care that people were not going to lose their homes because they couldn't afford to pay the rent, or that the rent was pushed up and they would be on the street and then vulnerable to the wartime and or vulnerable to COVID, as it was several years ago. So many European governments were very careful about this. It's the easiest thing that the Ukrainian government could do is actually, moderate the increase in high demand areas, make sure that increase is only in line with the actual cost, but not extracting the most from the tenant. That's really ugly market. It's the law of the jungle. We don't want that. Because of course, the money that people have to spend on their rent, they are not able to spend on their food, on their healthcare, on public transport, on going to see their grandma, or whatever. They can't travel. They can't buy books for uni. They can't even pay to study. If you make housing unaffordable for young people, they can't flourish. It's really, really hard. So we really need to make sure that we have quality choices for them. And the easiest one is to improve the rights and standards of standard leases and prevent discrimination. But of course, you also need someone to be a champion. So, you know, I was amazed 3 or 4 years ago that there was no union of tenants. We have all this talk of homeowner associations, you know, but there's nothing, no tenants association. There's no some advocacy body that makes sure there's a good model contract, makes sure that there's really good law reform, makes sure that the rent you pay is a fair rent. And how do they do that in other countries? You mentioned the Netherlands. Yeah, and that's actually a pretty good example.
This approach, because it's so clear for me. It's quality. It's some points, and we can see it. We can count it. And
that's right. You know, we have a home in the Netherlands, and my husband and I left home, and we left our 2 kids who are 20, 24 behind. You know, kids. We love them dearly, but the rest of the house we actually could rent out. And to make sure that that was done on a fair basis. And what we did was we downloaded a standard contract from the tenant union. We worked out the rent of the rooms, and we did that by measuring them, knowing if there was heating, knowing if there was access to a good working bathroom, they had access to the kitchen, they could be outside on the balcony, etc. So these things were all measured by square meter on a point system, and that translated into a rent. Our tenants love to live in our home because it's at such a reasonable rent. And if we go across the street, you'll see a landlord which, under the previous regime, has just rented out to the maximum. So you've got a tenant living in a very poor quality dwelling, paying so much that it's impossible for them to study. So they would have to work almost 7 days a week to pay for that rent. And that's just crazy. So expensive housing undermines the education of students. So it's got to be, you know, reasonable. And this point system really helped to ensure that it was. The other thing in our city is that the city registers landlords. So if I'm a landlord, I have to register with the city and the tenant agreement I have. And they check that. They say, oh, that's too high for what you have. You're overcosting, you're overcharging.
Like we need a proof.
And
your
they
cost.
also ask me, and I know from firsthand, they say, show us the payments. Show us where the rent comes in. So we have to do that and declare that. We also have to declare it every year in our tax. So it makes the system so clear, and it makes sure that the city government knows who's living there. That knows that tenant is not being exploited.
Yeah.
So also what that does is it gets rid of the bad landlords. They don't want that transparency. Well, good riddance. Better not to have a bad landlord in the system, and better to support good landlords doing the right thing. But there are other ways we can do it too, because having the odd bedroom here and there, that's a bit hit and miss.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that you see cities doing is actually enabling good landlords, good housing providers to participate in the development of housing in the city. So the most world famous, of course, is Vienna. Vienna's just known as a tenant paradise. Great housing, affordable housing, and the tenant pays a cost rent, they call that. So that's a rent based on the cost of the dwelling, on the financing costs, on the maintenance costs. When those loans on that dwelling are paid off, the tenant still keeps paying. But what happens to that money is that it goes back into a revolving fund. And every 15 years, there'll be a new kitchen and bathroom. The balcony will be cleaned up. The outside of the building will be repaired. It's a revolving fund which keeps the value in the building and tenant quality improving. So you see that happening in Vienna, really fantastic. And half of the rental accommodation in that city is provided that way. Half. That's really big.
Yeah, it's a lot of.
Yeah. And of course, the same thing, the same principle, they use that same principle in the Danish system, in the French system with 5 million dwellings, and in the Finnish system, which is probably one of the most loved, actually, by young people and by communities. So it's really worth taking from the best. And my hope in the future is that Ukraine develops its own European best.
It's my hope too.
It's my hope, yeah. So we work towards that. That Ukraine number one on the housing. That's what we want.
Yeah, our government have already worked on it plan of social housing, of rent planning, and I think they can choose some of this worldwide experience and provide it here in Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, in February 2020, January 2023, we invited 5 ministers and 16 mayors to come to Vienna, and they came by train, overnight train, and we spent many hours also visiting some of these developments, looking at them in the real, and discussing the possibilities. Also there were those who were willing to help them. European Commission was there, European Investment Bank was there, to say, well, you have to work it out yourself, but we could help you investing in a good model, and that also became part of the Ukraine facility plan. So Europe has created a facility for 50 billion euros, and attached to that facility is a plan, and in that plan is to reform the social housing system and to make it much more inclusive, energy efficient, and also meaningful for municipalities and communities. So we're working on that hard already, and we hope by the end of next year at least to have a law. But in the meantime, they're piloting that model with a number of cities. So the European Investment Bank will invest in a pilot where they try to work out a good model. So let's hope that teaches everybody something.
So now we know that our ministers have a practical experience in that and have some possibilities. So we will ask about that in the future. Yeah. And some words about rebuilding after war. I need to check the numbers. Since 2022, about 2.4 million homes have been damaged or destroyed. And I would like to ask you about the experience of other countries, about how they rebuilt after war, or maybe some natural disease with what they faced. Maybe you can provide us some practical experience or examples, and that we can learn more from them.
Can you imagine? It's 1947, right? And the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe is being established. And its role is to advise countries in Europe on how to apply to resolve the housing problem. And even back then, there was this international collaboration. I think there was a French and a Swedish who wrote this technical report all about how governments can revive a housing system which will deliver. You know, they knew that the financial system had collapsed. They knew that the building sector was so risk averse it wouldn't do anything. So there was substantial international investment through the Marshall Plan, often building on the roots and shoots of a better system in certain countries. So in Vienna, it was all about the limited profit housing scene, and so there was investments made into that. That's what grew. In Finland, you had massive displacement because Russia had taken land. There was almost, I think, 450,000 people. They needed to resettle. The Germans had left the country and burnt down to the ground where they left. So Rovaniemi, in the capital of Lapland, was just a scorched earth. So in Finland, they empowered the cities to have first rights to acquire the land and to reorganize it, also in Warsaw. And they still have that. So Helsinki now is the largest landowner of and it is able to plan for the expansion of and the diversity of housing choices in that city. So since 1947, cities have had the first right to purchase at a reasonable cost, for example, at the agricultural value, the land to be able to plan to integrate the communities and to give choices in those communities. So we see that approach in Finland. We see a different approach in Vienna. We saw another approach and approaches in France and in the Netherlands, where you remember Rotterdam was completely bombed, completely burned to the ground. Nothing was left except the town hall and a church. They revitalized, rebuilt that city to become one of the most significant ports in Europe. You know, modernized container shipping, you know, moved on to next generation. And that's been actually the Netherlands logistics hub for, you know, it really, really changed our economy and brought us into very prosperous times. So there were different tools, but probably what's common to all of them was the role in land policy and the power that cities had to set and reorganize the quality of the neighborhoods to shape how they would be. So there's that. Also, you had strong municipal teams. So in Finland, interestingly, they had brigades. So architects and planners actually formed brigades. So you have military brigades and they had recovery brigades. So architects
in the same time
after the war, after the active war. So basically they were mobilized. They were given, of course, jobs. They formed teams to serve the affected communities. So if we look at some of the cities now, which have only a very, very limited resources, some of them have gone abroad, some of them have died. There's just a small team, and the world is being expected of them because of the decentralization reforms. So how do you mobilize a scattering of architects who are sitting by waiting to be contracted or having a competition? No, Finland was much more. So it turned urban planning and architecture into a service of the community. It made it a public service, literally, overnight. And that is why urban planning and architecture is so strong in Finland today. And they have municipalities which have very, very strong, and look at Helsinki. I mean, Helsinki is world class in the way it designs and plans neighborhoods. It even has 2 development companies of its own. One of them owns 50,000 units of affordable housing in the city. Those rents in those companies are 30% below what the private sector is. So it offers quality choice. It's planning the most beautiful neighborhoods with lovely homes I would be proud to live in, which we've visited on fieldwork, and really lovely places to live. Also energy efficient, also well connected to public transport. So what you create in the post-war environment will define the role of municipalities, architects and planners for the future. If you leave it all up to sporadic competitions, winners and losers, that's what you'll have.
We'll all lose.
It will be, But if you build in and strengthen your municipalities, that they're capable, that architecture and planning is genuinely seen as a service to the community, then you'll have a whole generation of beneficiaries. You know, you will become better than Finland. You know, you will become number one, you know, in good cities and good housing choices. So we really wish the best for Ukraine, that it makes some wise choices and draws on the best and creates its own way.
Thank you for your answers, for your